She said, "I'm going out with the girls tonight. Don't wait up." I replied, "Okay, no big deal." Then I tracked her car with a GPS device. She was headed to meet him. While she was out, I swapped her favorite perfume with a scent that reminded me of betrayal. 24 hours later, she walked back in, full of smiles, but when she got close enough, I watched her freeze. She had no idea what I had planned next. My name is Jack Grady, and I'm a marine engineer in this godforsaken coastal city that feels like it's been rotting from the inside out since the 80s. The rain never stops here, and neither does the gossip. I fix boat engines for a living, which means my hands are always dirty and my back always aches. My wife, Melissa, is a hotshot attorney downtown, all sharp suits and sharper ambition. We used to be a team. Now we're just two people sharing a mortgage. The night everything changed, I was in the garage working on Mrs. Patterson's outboard motor when I heard Melissa's phone buzzing on the workbench. She'd left it there while grabbing her purse. The screen lit up with a text from someone named B that made my blood freeze. "Can't wait to taste you again tonight." I stood there holding that phone, rain drumming on the garage roof, feeling like the world had tilted sideways. 22 years of marriage, and this is how I find out? Through a horny text message while elbow deep in motor oil. But here's the thing about being underestimated your whole life. You learn to be patient. You learn to watch. You learn to think before you act. I put the phone back exactly where she'd left it and went back to work. When Melissa came out 20 minutes later, all dolled up for her girls' night, I just smiled and kissed her cheek. "Have fun, honey. Tell Sarah and Kim I said hi." She actually blushed. The guilt was written all over her face, but she was too arrogant to think I'd notice. After she left, I did what any reasonable husband would do in 2023. I fired up the laptop and started digging. It didn't take long to find the credit card statements she thought she'd hidden. Fancy restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel charges, a jewelry store receipt for a men's watch that definitely wasn't for me. The pieces fell together like a jigsaw puzzle made of broken glass. Brent Pomeroy, her law firm partner. The guy she'd been talking about constantly for months. Brent thinks we should expand the practice. Brent has such innovative ideas. Brent. I should have been devastated. Should have been crying or drinking or punching walls. Instead, I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Maybe it was 20 years of being talked down to by people in expensive suits. Maybe it was a lifetime of being the blue-collar guy who wasn't quite good enough for his ambitious wife's social circle. Or maybe I was just tired of being the fool. I grabbed my jacket and headed out into the rain. If Melissa was at the Ocean View Motel like her GPS suggested, I had some reconnaissance to do. The motel was exactly the kind of sleazy place you'd expect. Neon sign flickering, parking lot full of puddles, the smell of cigarettes and desperation hanging in the air. I spotted Melissa's silver Lexus parked next to a black Mercedes with the license plate LAWMAN1. Real subtle, Brent. I sat in my pickup truck for about an hour, watching the rain streak down the windshield and planning my next move. I could have stormed up to that room, kicked down the door, and confronted them both. But that would have been satisfying for about 5 minutes. And then what? Divorce court, splitting assets, becoming the bitter ex-husband who couldn't handle his wife's success? Number. If Melissa and her boyfriend wanted to play games, I'd show them what a real player looked like. I walked over to Brent's Mercedes and got to work. 20 years as a marine engineer teaches you a lot about how machines work and how to make them stop working. I popped the hood, disconnected the battery cables, and loosened a few crucial bolts. Nothing dangerous, just enough to leave them stranded. Then I took out a piece of paper and wrote, "Hope it was worth it. See you soon, lover boy. A concerned citizen." I tucked the note under his windshield wiper and walked back to my truck, feeling lighter than I had in months. This was just the opening move. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "Having so much fun with the girls. Might be really late." I texted back, "No problem, I'll leave the porch light on," but I had no intention of making things easy for her. When she got home at 2 a.m, reeking of cheap cologne and making excuses about Kim's car breaking down, I was waiting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and a smile. "How was girls' night?" "Oh, same old drama. Sarah's having problems with her husband again." The lies came so easily to her, I almost admired the performance. "That's too bad," I said, sipping my coffee. "By the way, someone left this for you." I handed her an envelope I'd prepared. Her name written in block letters, no return address. Inside was a single photograph I'd taken of her car parked at the motel, along with a note, "Smile, you're on candid camera." I watched her face go white as she opened it. Her hands were shaking. "Jack, I can explain." "Explain what?" "It's just a picture of your car. Why would you need to explain that?" She stared at me, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I'd figured out. The smart, successful attorney suddenly looked like a deer in headlights. I'm pretty tired, I said, standing up and rinsing my cup in the sink. Think I'll head to bed. You coming? She nodded mutely, still clutching that envelope. As I walked past her toward the stairs, I leaned in close and whispered, Sweet dreams, honey. Hope you don't have any nightmares. That night, she lay next to me rigid as a board. I'm probably wondering what her loving husband was planning next. I slept like a baby. The next morning, Melissa was up before dawn, pacing around the house like a caged animal. She kept checking her phone, probably trying to reach Brent to compare notes about his car troubles. I made breakfast and hummed while I cooked, enjoying every minute of her obvious panic. You seem chipper this morning, she said, trying to sound casual. Beautiful day, I replied, flipping pancakes. Sometimes things just have a way of working out, you know? She didn't know what to make of that, so she grabbed her coffee and headed upstairs to get ready for work. I heard her on the phone, voice low and urgent, but I couldn't make out the words. Didn't matter. I knew she was talking to him. After she left, I called in sick to work and drove over to Red's bar, the kind of dive where everybody knows your name and nobody judges you for drinking before noon. Red Morrison had been my friend since high school, back when we were both young and stupid enough to think life would be fair. You look like hell, Red said, sliding a beer across the bar. What's eating you? I told him everything. The texts, the motel, the credit card statements. Red listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head or muttering under his breath. So what's your play? He asked when I finished. I'm going to destroy them, I said simply. Not physically. I'm not a violent man, but I'm going to make them wish they'd never met each other. Red grinned. Need any help? That afternoon, I paid a visit to Coach Ray at the boxing gym where I'd been working out for the past 5 years. Ray was pushing 70, but still looked like he could go 10 rounds with guys half his age. He'd been training fighters since before I was born, and he understood the psychology of combat better than anyone. You got that look, he said when I walked in. Like you're getting ready for a fight. Maybe I am. Well, remember what I always tell you boys. Don't just take a punch. Hit back where it hurts. I spent an hour on the heavy bag, working out my frustrations and planning my next move. By the time I left, I knew exactly what I was going to do. That evening, Melissa came home with Thai food and an obviously rehearsed speech about how we needed to reconnect and work on our marriage. She was scared, trying to get ahead of whatever she thought I might know. I've been thinking, she said over pad thai, maybe we should take a vacation. Just the two of us. Remember how we used to talk about going to Hawaii? Sounds expensive, I said. Can we afford it? I mean, with all those restaurant bills and hotel charges on the credit card? She nearly choked on her food. What do you mean? Oh, I was looking at our statements online. Noticed some charges I didn't recognize. The Ocean View Motel, for instance. When were you there? The color drained from her face. I had a client meeting there. Sometimes we have to meet clients in unconventional places. At midnight on a Tuesday? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. It's okay, I said, reaching across the table to pat her hand. I'm sure you had a good reason. You always do. That night, she locked herself in the bathroom for an hour. I could hear her crying, but I felt nothing. 22 years of marriage, and she was crying over getting caught, not over what she'd done to us. The next day, I put phase 2 of my plan into motion. I drove to Brent's office building downtown and waited in the parking garage until I saw him arrive. He was driving a rental car. Apparently his Mercedes was still in the shop. Good. I followed him to the elevator and made sure to get in the same car. Excuse me, I said as the doors closed. Aren't you Brent Pomeroy? I think you know my wife, Melissa Grady. He went pale. Up close, he was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of weak chin that suggested he'd never been punched in his life. Yes, we work together. So I've heard. She talks about you all the time, says you're very hands-on. The elevator reached his floor, and he practically ran out. I smiled and waved as the doors closed. That afternoon, I made another stop, the office of Tasha Green, Melissa's best friend and supposed confidant. Tasha worked at a real estate agency across town, and I'd always thought there was something off about her. She was one of those people who thrived on drama, always stirring the pot and then standing back to watch the explosion. Jack, she said when I walked into her office, but her smile looked forced. What brings you here? Just wanted to thank you, I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Thank me? For what? For being such a good friend to Melissa. Always encouraging her to go out, have fun, live her life. Some wives don't have friends who support their extracurricular activities. Tasha's smile faltered. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. The girls' nights that aren't really girls' nights. The advice about following her heart. The alibis. I leaned forward. I know you know, Tasha. Question is, why are you helping her? She started to protest, but I held up a hand. Don't worry. I'm not angry with you. Actually, I'm grateful. If it weren't for friends like you, I might never have learned who my wife really is. I stood up and headed for the door, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Tasha? You might want to be careful about the company you keep. Sometimes when people play with fire, everyone gets burned. That evening, Melissa was a nervous wreck. She kept checking her phone, jumping at every sound, watching me like I was a bomb about to explode. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Fine, just tired. Maybe you should take it easy on those girls' nights. You've seemed stressed lately. She nodded quickly. Maybe you're right. But I wasn't done, not even close. The following week, I implemented the most devious part of my plan. I'd learned a lot about surveillance technology from my neighbor, Mrs. Larkin, who was convinced that teenagers were stealing her garden gnomes and had turned her front yard into a fortress of hidden cameras. The key, she explained over coffee, is to make them think they're safe while you're watching everything. I bought a tiny Bluetooth speaker online, the kind used for pranks, and managed to plant it in Melissa's office during the firm's open house event. Hidden behind a picture frame, it was virtually invisible, but could pick up conversations from across the room. For 3 days, I listened to the most boring legal discussions imaginable. Then, on Thursday afternoon, I hit the jackpot. We need to be more careful. Melissa's voice came through crystal clear. Jack's suspicious. How suspicious? Brent's voice was tense. He knows about the motel. Someone took pictures. Jesus, Mel. I told you we should have been more discreet. It's too late for that now. We need to figure out how to handle this. Maybe we should just come clean. Get divorced. Be together properly. Are you insane? Do you know what a divorce would cost me? And what about your wife? Your kids? There was a long pause. Look, Melissa continued, Jack's not that smart. He fixes boat engines for a living. We can handle this. That stung more than I'd expected. After 22 years, she still saw me as the dumb blue-collar husband who wasn't worthy of her respect. What do you suggest? Brent asked. We lay low for a while. No more hotels. We can use your condo when Amanda's out of town. And if he has more evidence, then we discredit him. Make him look like a paranoid, jealous husband having a breakdown. Who's going to believe a mechanic over 2 successful attorneys? I turned off the recording and sat in my truck, hands shaking with rage. They thought they could destroy me, make me look crazy, ruin my reputation to cover their own tracks. They had no idea who they were dealing with. That evening, I put on my best performance yet. I came home with flowers and a bottle of wine, acting like the devoted husband trying to save his marriage. What's the occasion? Melissa asked suspiciously. Do I need an occasion to appreciate my beautiful wife? She softened slightly, probably thinking her plan was already working. Over dinner, I steered the conversation toward her work, asking about cases and clients. When I mentioned Brent, she tensed up. How's he doing? Haven't seen him around lately. He's fine. Busy with his own caseload. That's good. You two make a great team. Very compatible. She nearly choked on her wine. After dinner, I suggested we invite some friends over for a barbecue that weekend. Maybe Brent and his wife? I'd love to meet her properly. Melissa went white. Oh, I don't think they're available. They're very private people. That's a shame. I was looking forward to getting to know your work husband better. The phrase, work husband, made her flinch visibly. That night, I heard her on the phone again, whispering urgently. I couldn't make out the words, but the panic in her voice was unmistakable. The next day, I paid a visit to Mrs. Larkin, who was tending her garden and watching the neighborhood with hawk-like intensity. Morning, Mrs. Larkin. Beautiful day. Indeed it is, Jack. Though I noticed some unusual activity at your house lately. That silver car has been coming and going at odd hours. Oh, that's just Melissa's work friend. They've been collaborating on a big case. Mrs. Larkin raised an eyebrow. Collaborating. Is that what they're calling it these days? I had to admire the old woman's directness. Between you and me, I said conspiratorially, I think there might be more to it than work. Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Mrs. Larkin lived for this kind of gossip. I suspected as much. The way they were carrying on in your driveway last Tuesday was hardly professional. You saw them? Clear as day, kissing like teenagers. In broad daylight. The nerve of some people. I filed that information away for later use. Well, I said, I suppose these things have a way of working themselves out. Indeed they do, Jack. Indeed they do. That afternoon, I implemented Phase 3 of my plan. I'd done some research on Brent Pomeroy and discovered some interesting facts about his personal life. His wife Amanda was a pediatric nurse who worked long shifts at the children's hospital. His teenage daughter was captain of her high school debate team. His son played varsity baseball. From the outside, they looked like the perfect family. But I'd learned from Melissa's text that Brent had some embarrassing secrets, including a prescription medication problem that he was desperate to keep hidden from his wife and colleagues. I crafted a careful plan that would expose these secrets without breaking any laws. It required patience, timing, and a little bit of social engineering. The opportunity came that Friday evening at the annual Waterfront Charity Gala, one of those stuffy events where all the local lawyers and business owners gathered to see and be seen. Melissa had insisted we attend, probably to maintain appearances. I put on my best suit and played the role of the supportive husband, shaking hands and making small talk with people who barely acknowledged my existence. Then I spotted Brent across the room, looking nervous and checking his phone constantly. It was time to make my move. The charity gala was held at the old Maritime Museum, a fitting venue for what was about to become a shipwreck. I watched Melissa work the room, all smiles and professional charm, while Brent lurked near the bar looking like a man waiting for an execution. I bided my time, making polite conversation with the other spouses and playing the role of the devoted husband. But I was watching, always watching, waiting for the perfect moment. It came when the event organizer asked for volunteers to help with the silent auction announcements. I stepped forward before anyone else could volunteer. "I'd be happy to help," I said, taking the microphone from the surprised organizer. From the podium, I had a perfect view of the entire room. I could see Melissa near the front, her face a mask of confusion and growing alarm. Brent was trying to edge toward the exit, but the crowd was too thick. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Before we announce the auction winners, I'd like to take a moment to talk about honesty and integrity." A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't the usual charity gala script. "You see, I've learned recently that some people in our community aren't quite what they seem. They present one face to the world while living very different lives in private." Melissa was frantically shaking her head, trying to catch my attention, but I ignored her. Take my wife's colleague, for instance. Successful attorney, pillar of the community, devoted family man. But did you know he's been having an affair with a married woman? Did you know he's been using his law firm's resources to hide assets from his own wife? The room erupted in shocked whispers. Brent had gone completely white and was pushing through the crowd toward the exit. And the woman he's been seeing? She's been lying to her husband for months, using their joint credit cards to fund her secret relationship. She even convinced her best friend to provide alibis for her extramarital adventures. I looked directly at Melissa, who was staring at me in horror. "But here's the thing about secrets," I continued. "They have a way of coming to light. And when they do, the truth can be devastating." Security guards were moving toward the podium now, but I wasn't finished. So let this be a lesson to all of us. Honesty isn't just a virtue, it's a necessity. Because when you build your life on lies, eventually the whole structure comes crashing down. I set the microphone down and walked calmly off the stage, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces and excited whispers. Melissa caught up with me in the parking lot, her face twisted with rage. "How could you do that?" she screamed. "You've destroyed everything." "I destroyed everything?" I laughed. "That's rich, coming from you. You don't understand the damage you've just done. My career, my reputation. Your reputation as what? A cheating wife? A liar? A woman who thinks her husband is too stupid to figure out what she's been doing behind his back?" She stared at me, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Jack, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling, start over. With what? More lies, more deception, more of you treating me like I'm beneath you?" Brent appeared behind her, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You son of a bitch," he snarled. "You just ruined both our lives." "No," I replied calmly. "You did that when you decided to sleep with my wife." He took a step toward me, hands clenched into fists. I'd been hoping for this. "Go ahead," I said. "Take a swing. Give me an excuse to defend myself in front of all these witnesses." He stopped, probably remembering that assault charges wouldn't help his already destroyed career. "This isn't over," he said. "You're right. It's not." I walked to my truck and drove home, leaving them standing in the parking lot to face the consequences of their actions. But I wasn't done, not even close. The next morning, I woke up to find my front yard full of reporters and neighbors. Word of the previous night's drama had spread through the community like wildfire, and everyone wanted to know more about the scandalous love triangle that had been exposed at the charity gala. I made coffee and watched from the kitchen window as Mrs. Larkin held court on her front porch, regaling anyone who would listen with tales of suspicious behavior she'd witnessed over the past few months. My phone rang constantly, reporters wanting interviews, friends wanting gossip, and Melissa calling from her hotel room begging me to make a statement retracting everything I'd said. I ignored them all. Around noon, Detective Martinez showed up at my door. I'd been expecting this visit. "Mr. Grady, I'm Detective Martinez. I'd like to ask you a few questions about last night's incident." "What incident?" "I gave a speech at a charity event. A speech that made some pretty serious accusations against your wife and her colleague." "Did I make accusations?" "I thought I was speaking hypothetically about the importance of honesty." Martinez smiled grimly. Mr. Grady, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know when someone's playing games. What games? My wife and her boyfriend destroyed their own reputations. I just provided the venue. Mr. Pomeroy claims you've been harassing him, vandalizing his car, following him, making threats. That's interesting. Do you have any evidence of these alleged crimes? Martinez studied me for a long moment. You're walking a very thin line here. I'm walking on the right side of the law. Everything I've done has been perfectly legal. Legal doesn't mean right. Neither does adultery, but that didn't stop them. After Martinez left, I sat in my kitchen and planned my final move. The public humiliation had been satisfying, but it wasn't enough. I wanted them to understand the full consequences of their betrayal. That afternoon, I drove to Tasha's office. She was packing boxes when I arrived, apparently having decided that a career change was in order. Leaving town? I asked. She looked up, her face haggard and defeated. What do you want, Jack? Just curious about something. Why did you help her? Tasha sat down heavily in her chair. You really want to know? I really do. Because 5 years ago, when I was going through my divorce, I asked you for a job. Just temporary work, answering phones, filing papers. You turned me down flat, said you couldn't afford the help. I remembered that conversation. Tasha had been desperate, facing financial ruin, and I'd been struggling to keep my own business afloat. 2 weeks later, she continued, you hired that college kid to do the exact same job I'd asked for, because he was young and eager and didn't come with the baggage of a messy divorce. So this was revenge? This was justice. You left me hanging when I needed help, so I returned the favor. I stared at her, pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. You orchestrated this whole thing. I just gave Melissa permission to do what she already wanted to do. Told her she deserved better than a husband who didn't appreciate her ambition, introduced her to Brent at that legal conference, made sure they had opportunities to spend time together. You destroyed my marriage for revenge? You destroyed my life first. I left her office feeling strangely empty. The betrayal was complete now. Not just my wife and her lover, but the friend who had orchestrated the whole thing out of spite and wounded pride. But I still had one card left to play. The annual Founders' Day celebration was the biggest event of the year in our little coastal city. Everyone would be there, families, business owners, politicians, and most importantly, everyone who had been talking about the scandal that had consumed the local legal community. I spent the morning preparing for what would be my final performance. I'd received divorce papers from Melissa's lawyer the day before, along with a restraining order that prohibited me from contacting her or Brent directly. But it said nothing about public events or freedom of speech. The celebration was held at the waterfront park, with food trucks, live music, and a main stage where local dignitaries would make speeches about community values and civic pride. I arrived early and positioned myself near the front of the crowd, wearing my best shirt and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Mayor Hendricks was droning on about economic development when I saw them arrive, Melissa, Brent, and surprisingly Tasha, all trying to blend into the crowd near the back. They looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, but appearances had to be maintained. When the mayor finished his speech, he opened the microphone to community members who wanted to share their thoughts about what made our city special. Several people spoke about local businesses, volunteer organizations, and neighborhood watch programs. Then I raised my hand. I'd like to say something, I called out. The mayor hesitated, probably remembering the charity gala incident, but the crowd was watching, and he couldn't refuse without causing a scene. I walked up to the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces, finding Melissa's terrified expression in the crowd. Malvanza, my name is Jack Grady, I began. I've lived in this city my whole life, raised here by parents who taught me the value of hard work and honest dealing. I've always believed that what makes a community strong is trust. Trust between neighbors, trust between spouses, trust between friends. The crowd was listening intently, sensing that something significant was about to happen. But recently, I've learned that trust can be a fragile thing. It can be broken by people who think they're smarter than everyone else, who believe they can manipulate and deceive without consequences. I paused, letting the tension build. 3 people in this community have spent months lying to their families, their colleagues, and their friends. They've stolen money, destroyed marriages, and corrupted professional relationships, and all while presenting themselves as pillars of respectability. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People were turning to look for the subjects of my speech. But here's what they didn't understand. In a community like ours, the truth always comes out. And when it does, the consequences are swift and severe. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. This envelope contains evidence of adultery, financial fraud, and professional misconduct. Evidence that has been turned over to the appropriate authorities and will be made public in tomorrow's newspaper. That was a bluff. I had no evidence of financial fraud, and the newspaper had refused to publish the more salacious details of the scandal. But they didn't know that. The 3 people responsible for this betrayal know who they are. They're in this crowd right now. probably hoping they can slink away and start over somewhere else. But I want them to understand something. Actions have consequences, and those consequences follow you wherever you go. I looked directly at Melissa, then at Brent, then at Tasha. You thought you were playing a game, but games have winners and losers, and today you lost. I set the microphone down and walked off the stage to a mixture of applause and shocked silence. Behind me, I could hear the crowd buzzing with excitement and speculation. I made it halfway across the park before Brent caught up with me, his face red with rage and humiliation. "You bastard," he hissed. "You've destroyed everything." "Good," I replied. That was the point? He swung at me then, a wild, desperate punch that I saw coming from a mile away. I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him past me, then grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back, using a technique Coach Ray had taught me years ago. "Let me go," he shouted. "Gladly," I said, releasing him with a shove that sent him sprawling into the grass. A crowd had gathered to watch the confrontation, including several people with cell phone cameras. Brent scrambled to his feet, his expensive suit grass-stained and his dignity in tatters. "This isn't over," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over since the moment you decided to sleep with my wife." He walked away, shoulders slumped in defeat, while the crowd dispersed and went back to their festival activities. I found Melissa waiting by my truck, tears streaming down her face. "Are you satisfied now?" she asked. "You've destroyed all of us." "I didn't destroy anything. I just revealed what was already there. We could have worked this out privately. We could have gotten counseling, tried to save our marriage. With what foundation? More lies? More deception? More of you thinking I'm too stupid to deserve the truth?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What happens now? Now you live with the consequences of your choices, just like I've been living with them for the past 6 months. Jack, please." "It's over, Melissa. Sign the divorce papers and move on with your life. Find someone who deserves what you have to offer. And what about you? What's your plan now?" I looked out at the water, watching the boats bob in the harbor where I'd spent so many years working and dreaming. I'm going to rebuild. Start over. Maybe move somewhere new, somewhere people don't know my story. "You're leaving?" "The city is too small for all of us, and frankly, I'm tired of the scenery." She nodded, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Jack, for all of it. I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo the damage." She walked away then, leaving me alone in the parking lot with the sounds of the festival continuing in the background. I climbed into my truck and drove home one last time, past Mrs. Larkin's house where she was undoubtedly watching from behind her curtains, past the marina where I'd worked for so many years, past all the familiar landmarks of a life I was ready to leave behind. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone had been ringing all day, reporters, lawyers, friends wanting to know what came next. But I already knew what came next. Tomorrow, I would put the house on the market. I would sell my business to my assistant, who had been wanting to buy it for years. I would pack up 22 years of marriage and start over somewhere new, somewhere I could be just Jack Grady again, not the man whose wife had betrayed him in front of the entire town. As the stars came out, I thought about Melissa and Brent and Tasha, all of them facing the wreckage of their own making. Melissa would probably rebuild her career eventually, maybe in another city where the scandal couldn't follow her. Brent would likely do the same, assuming his wife didn't take him for everything in the divorce. And Tasha would continue being Tasha, stirring up drama wherever she landed next. But they would all remember this summer, remember the man they underestimated, the blue-collar husband who turned out to be smarter and more ruthless than any of them had imagined. I finished my beer and went inside to start packing. Tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of my life, and I intended to make it count. 3 weeks later, I was loading the last of my belongings into a moving truck when Mrs. Larkin came over to say goodbye. "Going to miss having you as a neighbor, Jack," she said. "Things won't be nearly as interesting around here. I'm sure you'll find new sources of entertainment." She laughed. "Oh, I already have. Did you hear that Melissa's law firm fired her? And Brent's wife took him for half of everything in the divorce? And that Tasha woman was arrested for embezzling from her real estate company?" I hadn't heard about Tasha's arrest, but I wasn't surprised. People who make a living by deception usually end up deceiving themselves. "What goes around comes around," I said. "Indeed it does. Where are you headed?" "Montana. Got a job with a marine engineering firm that works on lake systems. Clean air, honest work, fresh start." "Sounds perfect for you." As I drove out of town for the last time, I passed the waterfront park where I'd delivered my final speech. The festival decorations were gone, and life had returned to normal, but I knew the story would be told and retold for years to come. The story of Jack Grady, the marine engineer who took on the lawyers and won. I smiled and kept driving, leaving the past behind and heading toward whatever came next. The road stretched out ahead of me, full of possibilities and free of lies. For the first time in months, I felt truly free.